Alright. Well, I guess in short, to sum up this video, because the title might not cover it. So, from the last ice age back, there's really nothing found for proof of humanity. And, yes, there's the argument of, well, we have tools and stuff. Yeah, but they don't date back that far. Well, we have writings on the wall. It's like, but they don't date back that far. Carving, sculptures, just about everything we have, nothing goes past the 10,000 BC mark. Like, well, they got skeletons, yeah, of hominids and things that were similar to modern day human beings, but there's really no proof of that. So the only thing we really have hard proof or evidence of our existence is to about 10,000 BC. And then all the writings on the wall that we have found from that time to now does speak of things prior, but there's nothing. There's literally nothing. Like, absolutely nothing at all. And they have searched, and they're still searching, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot more they have to search, but I think it's there. And the reason I think we're not finding it is because we ourselves destroyed it. Not accidentally, but intentionally on accident. Okay, so what I'm getting at is I'm not saying that in the pursuit of finding it, they destroyed it. That's not what I'm saying. So I want to relate this to something. I think they weren't allowed to show any form of them ever being here at some point in time. Us humans. And the reason I say this is because, okay, let's just say we can come to a point in humanity where we were just cavemen. We'll just say that. What is our day-to-day life? Wake up, protect yourself, hygiene, hunt, eat, sleep, recover. Next day, start all over again. It's really all you did. You really didn't focus on anything else. And as you started to build a family and then build a tribe, I would assume, if we can assume this is how things went, you would have the concept of maybe art. But in those times, we probably don't think about these things, but let's think that in those times, you wouldn't want competition or potential competition to know you're there. And the reason I say this is because back in those days, you've probably heard it before, if you were to come across another human being in the wild that you don't know and don't speak the same language, what do? Do y'all just back off and go about? Try to figure out who's who? Or do you shoot first and ask questions later? In theory and in practice, it pretty much makes sense to shoot first and ask questions later. Because if they assume you're an enemy or a potential threat, they'd rather take you down than find out. So they would assume you'd do the same thing, so they're going to do it to you first. That's just how it is. So I think that back then it was you had to be quiet. You had to leave nothing behind. All their tools, scraps, everything, bedding, all of it, they would just tear it all up to where it looked like they were never in the position they were in, and they moved on to their next plot. This is how those families of nomads moved. And yeah, we can say in history, well, it shows that 6,000 years ago, traveling nomads would leave tools behind. Yes, they got sloppy. But this is after the progression of art and language and I don't know, writing? Literature to a point? But we're talking back before all of this. I think that maybe before the last ice age, it was one of those, you can't make art because let's just say at some point somebody did make art. Well, that was used to track down certain families or certain tribes that had certain things that people knew that they can steal or pillage without killing everyone because they know they can get more. They would just basically harvest them for resources. It's like, okay, you make these little sculptures look like oranges with 2 thumbprints in the inside. It's just weird. It's just something that they do. You know? If I know that I can look around and find what seems like old camps that have these things, and I stumble upon one that's currently inhabited, and I go pillage them out of curiosity and find out that they have large sums of gold in certain areas and houses in ratio to their population, to the amount of gold they have, I could go, okay, that's just assuming that gold is valuable to them at that time. You can go, okay, well, okay, I'm only finding a few oranges here. There's probably not, it's probably a small family. Then you find just oranges everywhere. You're like, oh, there's got to be a lot of these people here. Let's track them. And you find that establishment, and then you're like, okay, guys, we know what we're going to do. Let's go and kill and pillage. It was probably quickly discovered, hey, how did they find us, and how do they know, and how do they keep coming back? How do they know where we're going? And they get smart, and they start developing roles and positions such as spotters and scouters. And they realize, oh, they're finding us through these things. They were becoming smart, but smart to a level of realizing that they can't show their intelligence. They have to stay within that tribe. Well, we can write this down, we can develop, no, we're not going to develop anything to write. It will stay from me to you. There was no need in making marks, scribes. There was no need in leaving your footprint behind. It was all covered. They didn't want to be discovered. Discovery meant either suffering or death. Discovery never meant anything good in those times, at least from what I can assume from this theory, this argument that I've come up with. So I would assume that before the Ice Age deal, that's more or less what it was. And if it's, I don't know how long that Ice Age would have lasted, but let's say that it didn't last that long. Let's say that it only lasted 100 years. Okay, cool, great. Let's say that it lasted 10,000 years. I don't know. But during that time, at some point, I would have to say that the younger of that civilization, or those civilizations in that time period, they probably lived throughout all of those same experiences and had the same concepts of, hey, we can't do this, until I think they eventually found a way to, hey, okay, well, everyone's dying really quickly, we're in an ice age, this is bad, we're losing resources, blah, 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 blah. They've come up with the concept of, hey, look, we can only survive through expanded numbers. We'd have to find other tribes. Well, then they'll just kill us. It's like, true. So, how can we leave a message behind to let ourselves be tracked without being found, but to let others know that we're not hostile? Well, that's where I think the concept of what would seem like a monk would come along. You would have a group of people who understand the outside world, who decide to pull themselves away from it, but want it to be all united. Not to be intruded or impeded upon, but to seek understanding of those around them and to be understood themselves. So I feel that those people at that time, they were not dumb. They decided, okay, we can put an animal on the wall. Okay, this is us. We hunt and we eat food. And they'd leave something behind like a salt block. It would catch these other tribes' attention. And every now and then they just leave a thing of meat. Or meat and maybe a tool. Just something small. And then they'd be followed. And one of two things would happen here. And they understood that, okay, one, they're either going to find this and always follow behind us, or two, they're going to try to find us and kill us. take our resources because they know we have them. So I think that they would either, one, stay on guard, be protected and willing and ready. They're basically dropping pamphlets of who they are and what they do, and they know that people may want to take that down for the right or wrong reasons, so they come and find them, and they're ready to fight. And if they lose, they lose, and if they win, they don't kill them, but they try to get them to understand, like, peace offering, join or die. And I think that's where that comes from, join or die. And it's like, okay, they join and they understand. It's like, okay, great. I think this is where some sort of a sense of outside community began to develop. And this is where I think some theories and conspiracies do make sense, is because if we take the other option of, okay, well, let's say they don't approach. You're going to have those groups that are so catering, so fulfilling to those around them, that they just leave these trinkets. They decide, you know what, how about there should be no conflict? How about we devise this in a way to where there will be no conflict? Well, then we won't be discovered. Well, what if they have it to where it's like, what if we create a group that doesn't exist and make it exist, but only in people's minds? And maybe that brings a sense of religion, but that's not what I'm speaking of. These people they set up, they're extras and put to the side, not what they can, I guess what they can spare, more or less. They put these things to the side and they make themselves seem like a culture that they're not, that they're very friendly and giving, and that this is what you do and you pass on to the next behind you. So you start to develop a new type of group of people that really don't exist, but everybody who comes and finds these tools and extra things behind them go, okay, well, this is cool what they're doing. This is smart. Oh, I could do this too. Maybe I should. Well, how do I know if it's real? Well, because these people are setting them up, this one specific tribe or specific tribes, if they've disbanded apart to work collectively in a separate way, they set up these things and these types of shelters to make it seem like there's a shadow tribe going about teaching this. So now it's like, hey, we do this in peace. We just don't want harm. We want to help. They start to see that, and if you will abuse that system and be like, hey, I'm just going to take it and leave. And others are, okay, this is understanding. I get that if you leave it alone and restock, I will have it. And if I restock and leave it alone, you will have it. But if I stop, you will stop. Because if there's nothing left, then why should I leave anything? So it becomes a trust system. And it becomes noticed that, okay, well, if you're watching this, that means somebody else is watching it, and they all watch from afar and realize, okay, so this is this group. And eventually they know how to make themselves seen from those out shelters, and they've made those shelters to where it's easy for you to see out. So you can't be, encroached upon, without warning. So it's like, I see you, you see me, we both understand. I know this isn't a trap, you know this isn't a trap. But at the same time, they both realize, hey, we want to help each other. And maybe they might bring an offering to show, like, hey, no, we have the same understanding, okay. They might not speak the same language, but it's the paintings on the wall that make all the sense. And yeah, some may have used that as a trap to ambush others, but again, it's trying to be set up in the most efficient way in bringing these people together. But the thing is, the two tribes that interact, if not 3, 4, 5 tribes down the road that interact, actually have nothing to do with the system. They're just followers of a system that was created by another tribe that just made the system up of a people that they're not even are, but of a society that they want. So they made it look like everybody else was following it, even though it was only them designing it and everybody else followed it. So maybe these are, the manifestors of modern society, but they were quiet about it. most tribes knew at one point that it's best to stay quiet. But these ones realized it's best to actually incur knowledge and give it off to others. So I think around the Ice Age time, it came to a time of scarcity to where those beliefs had to be implemented, and they were finally implemented. And throughout time, certain things happened to where certain pictures became symbols, and symbols became more refined, what we'd consider letters. Letters, graphs, images, hieroglyphs, I don't know, to show universal communication or a regional communication. And I think from that point, they started to develop actual languages. Because I think it would make more sense to where you might have your tone of grunts, this person might have their tone of grunts, this area might have their tone of grunts, and not understand each other. But the pictures, they can understand the pictures are universal. And I think the pictures turned into symbols, and the symbols became universal. Even though they all speak different languages, different grunts and tones and whatever, I don't know the theory, or if that's exactly how things happen, we weren't there. But would that not make sense? People do this all the time. If you have a flag on your hat, generally people would consider you patriotic. They wouldn't say, "Oh, that guy hates his country." They would say, "Oh, that guy must love that country because he has that flag." If you're wearing a jersey of a certain sports team, they would assume that you like that sports team. You're not against it. So it's the same thing with these. You carry these symbols. It's like this has this meaning. In our modern day, we see a guy with a shield. We assume he is an officer, a justice seeker, police, sheriffs, so on. And I think that was the same type of thing back then, was they used those symbols, and those symbols slowly turned into more uniformed code types. They got smart about it, created alphabets. And I think with those alphabets, you got different tones. And they were able to show these tones. This is where we begin to get maybe music. So understanding certain tonal values, they understood what could be used for a nice soothing music tone, something that could be more trustworthy of a language, and things that would show aggression with the same thing with that music. And then you start to develop true universal language. So people decided to start scribing. And then from there we go further on into art and manifesting out. And now we're here at this, what we consider another form of art, this digital platform. And maybe 10,000 years from now, we might be using some sort of language or understanding or form of communication, and people find these little silicone blocks, and they're like, "Oh, this is made of like a sand type deal." They look close into it, and they find these images of things, and they run them, and they find things like this, YouTube. They're like, "This is weird. I wonder what this means. Why would they do things this way?" And it's the same thing that we look back on finding images on the wall or looking at the hieroglyphics of the Egyptians. It's like, why did they write this? What does it mean? What is it? In all reality, it probably makes complete sense. And it's probably very, very intelligent, whatever they did. And this is why I bring up this concept. I tell people, we can't just assume that something developed with a certain amount of technology at a certain rate or in a certain pattern, because you just don't know. Because what if hieroglyphics are more primitive than our showing form of language, where we use stuff like binary and whatnot and send that stuff off into space to talk to aliens? What are we assuming, that it's our language using binary is more primitive, or hieroglyphics more primitive? You know, the argument would be, oh, hieroglyphics are more primitive. It's like, well, what if they're not? What if they're not? What if they used letters at one point and then went to hieroglyphs and then we went back to letters? You'd be like, well, that's bizarre. That's never going to happen. You know, you like to use this argument with a lot of people, and it's that the Japanese, they never developed sailboats. They were like, well, yeah, they do. They have sailboats now. I'm like, they went over from rowboats to the whole steam industrial power boats, then went to sailboats, where the whole world went the other way around, to where it was rowboats, sailboats, steam powered, and motorized boats. And you're like, well, how could that be? Well, they were cut off at some point. Well, they cut themselves off from society and skipped that phase. And then when they found that phase, they went to that phase. So, yes, their technology developed backwards, and they probably would have never developed sails in the first place. They probably just would have went straight to motors. So how can we assume that, oh, well, the society is going to progress from this, and we think that they were in this stage of progression? It's like, you can't assume that. For all we know, we've skipped over certain technologies that we should have discovered, and if anything, we might be farther ahead than what we should be, or we might be very, very, very far behind from where we should be. And we don't know, so we can't assume that other civilizations, extraterrestrial or local or from the past, should be in a certain area. We can't assume that. We can't assume that our technology is advanced, and at the same time, we can't just throw a rocket and say that it's primitive at the same time, because we don't know. So, in reference to why I don't feel as though there is anything further back, is because even if 10,000 BC there was cavemen with laser guns shooting at each other, going, we will free the mind, they could have also been saying, we got to make sure we leave no trace behind, because if they ever find us, they will come get us. And whatever that is, we'll never know. And if that was the case, or if that was the story, and they said, make it all disappear, we can't ever leave nothing behind, always remember that. And they just, everything was wiped from humanity over a couple thousand years, or a couple hundred years, or a couple of years period. And then it just, humanity died off, the Ice Age went through and through, and then finally it thawed out. Society started again, and we began writing what happened. But anyway, that's about it for this video. But I think that's more or less my theory on why we can't find nothing solid past 10,000 BC. So, take it into perspective. Think about it. Tell me what you think about it. And maybe I'll make some more content on it. See where it goes.